So, on behalf of National Coming Out Day, I just wanted to put this out there and tell my story. I came in September 2002. It's kind of a cliche way it started. My boyfriend Brian and I had broken up, and he'd given me a shoebox of my stuff. And I sat on the edge of my bed and cried, and my mom came into my room. After like 5 minutes, she finally asked, "Is this a gay thing?" And growing up with Christian parents and a homophobic father, I was scared. And I said, "Well, if it is, am I out of the house?" And she said, "Of course not." So I said, "Yes, Brian is my boyfriend, or was at the time. And I love him. I am in love with him." And she seemed pretty cool about it. So I was like, okay, this is okay. And all I had asked is don't tell dad. Because I grew up with my father, who at the age of 8 years old told me that every father's worst nightmare is having a gay child. And he had also told me a story about when he worked at a lumber yard in Guelph, that he took a gay guy's hand after he hit on him, held it down, and broke it with a hammer. So at 8 years old, you already think there's something wrong with being gay. And those feelings manifested as I got older, and I developed internalized homophobia and a ton of shame. So after I came up to my mom, 2 days later, after she said she wouldn't tell my dad, he came into my room and said, "Your mom told me." And he was pretty cavalier about everything, but it was still, you could tell he was really uncomfortable. But he said, "Everything's going to be fine." Fast forward 3 days after that, and I'm watching a movie with my friend. They asked me to come upstairs. They sit me down, and they tell me that they gave me two options. Um, I can either stay at home and do Christian counseling, or I can move out. And because I had integrity and I had wanted to keep my pride, I chose to move out. And from there, I had to drop out of high school because I got a job to pay rent from my friend's mom's one of my friend's mom's rooms to have a place to stay. And through that window of 7 months when I was living on my own, um, I got a job at Food Basics, and again, all my friends had graduated in that last year, and I didn't. I have since, but I became very depressed and very isolated from everything, and I lost a ton of weight. I've always been like a bigger guy, and like my ribs were like protruding, and I knew that if I ever wanted to like move forward in a positive way, I was gonna have to move back. I was gonna have to face everything that I was scared of, and so I did, and I did Christian counseling, and I think we did like 4 sessions, and it was just like the most ridiculous, like Donald Trump piece of shit sessions that you can think of. Like he would say things like, "Your mom told me that like when you were 5 years old, a rock hit you in the head," and I was like, "Yeah, so what?" And then he explained that like when if you're born left-handed and you take a blow to the head, you become right-handed. And I was like, "You are actually comparing left and right to gay and straight." He's like, "Well, it's kind of the same thing." And I was like, "No, no, it's really not." And I remember responding with, "What are your credentials?" And he just said, "Right." So then, after paying $100 an hour, my parents were like, "Okay, this isn't working, obviously." So then, there was a window between, at that point, I was like 19 till 21, so like a 3 year gap between Kitchener and Toronto. And I would go on dates with guys, and my parents like would put their heads down, like I wasn't allowed to talk about it, but I forced it down their throats. I was like, "I'm going with this guy Will. He's an accountant. He makes really good money." And they were like, "Why are you telling us this?" Like, because I'm not ashamed of who I date. There's something wrong with me. My sister got engaged after 3 months, and rightfully so. Her and my brother-in-law are still together. They're happy. They have 3 beautiful kids. And that's another story. My sister and my brother-in-law struggled having their first kid. The firstborn now is Ozzy. He's now almost 10. And they sat me down before they even had him, before she was even pregnant. And they said, so we're trying to have a kid. And I said, that's amazing. I'm really excited. And they said, but we don't know what role we want you to play with our child. And I was confused, and I'm like, no, I'm going to be the uncle. Like, I'm really excited. Like, I want to be an uncle. And they said, we don't want him exposed to the gay thing. And when you hear those things, like it's everything comes back. It's like you remember everything your parents said about when I came out, like having to leave home, and then there was also when in between that time, my sister, who after I came out to, was like, let's go for lunch. And I was like, this is how it's supposed to happen. My big sister finds out I'm gay. We're gonna talk about boys. We're gonna go for lunch, and we went through a drive-through at Wendy's, not lunch. And she went back to her house at the time, and she um, said, "You're gonna die of AIDS. It's gonna be so hard. You're gonna support the whole family. You're this, you're that." And I literally felt like I had no one who was supposed to love me unconditionally in my corner. So then I moved to Toronto, and I took all that internalized homophobia and that shame and that depression with me. And I started working in on Church Street in the Village at the steak shop, and I struggled really hard trying to make friends and fitting in, and I think a lot of us can relate to that. Um, and that's because of the depression and the lack of being able to fit in with anyone. I ended up using like crystal meth and and doing things that I'm not proud of, but I was lost, and it took a long time to find myself. Fast forward now, like well, not now, but 10 years after that moment, and my parents started to come around. They became allies to the LGBTQ community, and they are the most supporting, loving, amazing people to our community that you'll ever meet. Like, they're so amazing. It just took them a really long time to come around, and I'm glad I didn't give up on them, because I would have been missing out on some pretty awesome parents. But those feelings, they don't get erased. They're all still there. Like, I still feel everything every day. But you can choose to live your life by the past, or you can live your life by moving forward and focusing on the present and future. And that's what I choose to do. I'm very fortunate, and I know there's so many people out there, and I'm so sorry for you. I'm so sorry that there's so many people out there who had horrible coming out stories. I've heard stories of parents beating their kids, and parents not ever talking to them again. And that breaks my heart. And I'm so sorry for anyone watching this that that you had that experience, because I know what it feels like, but I didn't feel that extreme pain, and so I'm really sorry that you had to go through that. Um, in closing, you have to remember, to everyone out there, for every amazing coming out story where your parents are like, "Oh, honey, we knew all the time, and we're going to join PFLAG, and we can't wait to go to Pride." There's hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, horrible coming out stories where they didn't have that luxury. So they came out to Toronto's, not just Toronto, but anywhere in the world. They went to the gay community to find a family, to find acceptance. And we shun each other so often, body shaming and slut shaming, and because we don't look a certain way, or and our own personal insecurities, and our own personal internalized homophobia, and things that we are ashamed of. And whether it's because you're scared that you might see something in someone else in yourself, we shame that, and like we create groups like bears and twinks, and because we marginalize, just because you have to look a certain way, it doesn't mean you have to fit into that community. Just because you're a twink doesn't mean you have to feel like a twink. Just because you look like a bear doesn't mean that you have to feel like a bear. At the end of the day, we all had that moment. We didn't know how we were going to be accepted. We didn't know how our friends were going to react. We didn't know how our family was going to react. Like, we're all connected in that same moment. We have to remember that we have to build a community and a family where that, like, we don't treat each other like the plastics in Mean Girls. We love each other. We accept each other, because there's a whole generation coming up now that need that, and we have to start start being nicer to each other and accepting each other. And everyone has a story, and it's I mean, it's one thing to hate someone because they're an asshole, but I mean, don't just write someone off just because they're overweight, or they're too skinny, or they have psoriasis, they have eczema, they have acne, they're too hairy, they're this or they're that. Like, don't write people off just because of the way they look, or like because you think they're beneath you, or think they're too above you. If you're at a bar and some guy says hi to you, it could just not because they're not hitting on you. It could just be because they don't have anyone. They just want to talk to someone who's also gay and make a friend. So, on behalf of National Coming Out Day, like, we all come from the same place. We all come from the same story. And it's our chance to make a difference now in this generation, and remember that, like, we are all the same in a lot of the ways, and talk so quickly judge each other. And again, I'm so fortunate to have my parents who, for years, hated me. Well, didn't hate me, but I felt like they hated me. And I felt like my sister hated me. I felt like my brother-in-law hated me. I felt like I had no one. And it took time, but they came around. And for a lot of you that are watching this, that maybe you are in the same position that I was, you might be lucky enough to be like I was. And then to some others, it sucks if you're not. But you can't have a family in the community, because hopefully, we all start loving each other and accept each other for who we are. And